Rick and Sasha.
Let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
Now, if you don't know who that is, well, let me answer the phone. Hello?
Hi, this is Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams. Without a doubt, y'all, this is the woman who ran for governor in 2018, and she would not concede because that was not a fair fight. Speaking of fair fight, she founded Fair Fight to make sure our voices are heard and our votes are counted. Voter suppression does exist. We're talking to Stacey Abrams, and it doesn't bother you when we say former gubernatorial candidate, does it?
No, it's not bothersome. I think it's important for people to understand the context of what I'm concerned about. And it's that we deserve to have leaders at every level of government, particularly at the state level, who are prepared to lead and to serve all people. And part of his failure as Secretary of State presaged what we are now seeing as his role in governor, which is that he does not necessarily care about everyone he serves.
With COVID-19 and the state of Georgia and other states now opening, Stacey, what do you feel? Are we moving too quickly? What do you think about the state of Georgia and his decision to open these barbershops and salons and bowling alleys and restaurants?
First of all,
Wait. Don't answer that question yet. We're talking to 2018 gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, who would not concede because it was not a fair fight. Sasha wants to know, what does Stacey Abrams think about her former opponent opening the state of Georgia for business? She'll answer that when we come right back. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn, and we're inside the party poll. Today, we're talking to Stacey Abrams. She ran against Brian Kemp in the state of Georgia in 2018. She was the first African-American majority leader and a female to run the United States, though she didn't get the win as governor because it wasn't a fair fight. And you know how most people just bow out and give their concession speech? Oh, no, not Stacey Abrams.
Let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
Now, as we know, the state of Georgia opened its doors for business, and her former opponent is now the governor. What are her thoughts about that state opening up during this corona pandemic? We'll hear what she has to say in less than 10 minutes. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. We're talking to Stacey Abrams. She's the founder of Fair Fight to make sure no vote is suppressed. She's experienced this in 2018 against Brian Kemp in her run as governor. Now Brian Kemp is affecting many African-American lives. Sasha, you had a question for her.
With COVID-19 and the state of Georgia and other states now opening, Stacey, what do you feel? Are we moving too quickly? What do you think about the state of Georgia and his decision to open barbershops and salons and bowling alleys and restaurants?
First of all, it's a poor business decision. There's no way to restart the economy with the lowest wage workers and without the necessary capacity to actually turn business. People aren't going to show up if they know they're in jeopardy. But what we do have happen is that those who will show up are putting the very workers who are the least protected at risk. The second problem that I have is that it goes against the science, and I think that's most fundamental. Today in Time magazine, there was a story about Hokkaido, Japan, state that in Japan shut down early, went through 3 weeks of shutdown, and when the curve flattened, reopened. And they're now experiencing a second wave. We do not know what it takes. And until we know and until we've tested, we are putting people in jeopardy. And the last thing I'll say is this. Georgia is 14th in infection rates in the country. We are 7th in the slowness of our testing, which means we are at the top for getting in trouble and at the bottom for being able to test, treat, or fix. And with that kind of message behind us, how can we convince anyone that they should have the confidence in going outside and restarting either the business or their lives?
Right. And you talked about how a lot of employees are low-wage earners, and they're still receiving SNAP benefits. that right there is going to make anyone desperate enough to go to work. So you're doing something with Project 100. Tell us about that.
Thank you. Project 100 is designed to respond from the private sector to a failure in the public sector. And that is, as people are starting to receive their $1,200 stimulus checks, a number of working families are not receiving those dollars even though they are entitled. Because they are SNAP beneficiaries, many of them do not have bank accounts, and they often do not file taxes. Those are the two ways monies are being delivered to these communities. And the antiquated systems that the federal government is using, those systems which should have been updated, because this is not the first time we've had to do an economic stimulus in this country. We know that there has to be a way to help these families while the government gets it right. And so Project 100 is moving $1,000 to 100,000 people across the country, including Detroit, Milwaukee, Albany, Georgia, doing the best that we can to fill in the gaps until the government does what it should.
Stacey, I have to tell you that I really admire you. You are a Black woman with natural hair, outspoken, big, voluptuous, whatever word that you want to use. You're not a white woman. You're not a white man. You're not a Black man. And I know that you have been labeled. How does that make you feel? And how do you go day by day having that on you?
That's a great question, Sasha. Stacey, we want you to answer that when we come back in 10 minutes. Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. We're talking to Stacey Abrams. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. We're talking to 2018 gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. And she did not concede because she said it wasn't a fair fight, and we all agree. Now, right before the break, Sasha, you had a question.
Stacey, I have to tell you that I really admire you. You are a Black woman with natural hair, outspoken, big, voluptuous, whatever word that you want to use. You're not a white woman. You're not a white man. You're not a Black man. And I know that you have been labeled. How does that make you feel? And how do you go day by day having that on you?
Part of my responsibility as the daughter of Robert and Carolyn Abrams, my parents are pastors. They raised me to believe that you tell the truth, you be direct, and you do the work. But they also raised me to understand that faith and family and service are the credos through which you live your life. My faith tells me that if I do what I should, the world will get better. Mm-hmm. My family tells me that if something goes wrong, they've got me. And my service tells me that my responsibility is to do the work regardless. And I think you understand this too. When you don't look like what people are used to, there's skepticism. Some of it is legitimate, a lot of it is not, but you can't overcome skepticism with silence. You have to be willing to be out there. And, I'm so excited to be on your show today. Rick, with incredible due respect to you, I know that Sasha represents a demographic that's not normally heard and seen on national radio and national television, which is that Black women on a nationally syndicated show leading the charge is an extraordinary thing. And I know how hard that is. Think about how hard it is in politics. We can name the Black women who've ever been U.S. senators. There are two of them. You cannot name a Black woman governor. Ever. And we have amazing congresswomen and incredible governors, but they didn't get there by being silent. And if we want to see ourselves represented at every level of government, at every level of business, at every level of entertainment, then we have to be willing to not simply hold and wait for people to see us. Sometimes you have to raise your hand.
Right. As a leader, people hang on to every word that you say. President Trump recently suggested that people use a cleanser for their lungs by way of injection. And then he turned around and said it was just a sarcastic joke. What are your thoughts on that? And I want you to answer that when we come back in 10 minutes. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn. It's Rick and Sasha with George Wilborn, and we're talking to Stacey Abrams. She's the first African-American female majority party gubernatorial nominee in the United States. In 2018, she was running against Brian Kemp, and she would not concede. It wasn't a fair fight. That's what she said. Now, recently, Stacey, President Trump suggested that people use a cleaning agent by way of injection to get rid of the coronavirus.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. And
after that, he tried to follow up and say it was just sarcasm. Stacey Abrams, what are your thoughts on that?
Donald Trump has led this country through 4 years of chaos and incompetence. And sadly, standing by his side, nodding pathetically the entire time, has been Mike Pence. America deserves an actual leader, someone who for 40 years has served this country. Joe Biden is the person we need, because what he will do is take the lessons he learned when he helped this country recover from our last episode of depression and collapse. He understands what we need to do, and he understands how to get it done. I know that he's going to put together a team that is going to be unparalleled, and he's going to pick who he needs to help him get that work done. And regardless of what position I may or may not hold, my commitment is to ensuring that in order to stop us from spending 4 more years trying to stop children from drinking bleach because the president said so, that we have a president who tells children that their futures are secure because he is willing to do the work to make it so.
All right, girl. You know, folks are out here talking and speculating. Do you want to run as vice president with Biden? Now, you ain't got to answer, okay?
No, I will say this.
Okay.
Vice President Biden has held this job, and he knows what it's going to take to lead this country forward. He is going to pick the team that he needs based on what he understands and based on the plans that he has for America. If asked to serve, of course I would, but we need to remember it's his choice. I've responded when people ask me if I would be willing to serve, because of course I would. But more important to me is making sure that we win in November, because if we do not win in November, we do not know what is ahead of us. But if we do win, if Biden does become our president, we will have for the first time in 4 years a leader who doesn't lie to his people and a leader who sees a better future for all of us.
Stacey, your book, Our Time Is Now, Power, Purpose, and the Fight for a Fair America. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about it and how we can get the book, girl.
Thank you. I was privileged last year in January and February to pitch this book, to talk about how voter suppression works in the 21st century, because a lot of people only remember it from the civil rights movement, but also to talk about the importance of identity, the importance of the census, and the importance of how we win elections with the diversity of our country, because we can't keep doing the same thing the way we have, expecting a different result. And so I'm excited that it's going to be released in print on June 9th. If you go and pre-purchase, you can get access to the audio version, I think in early May, but the print version comes out June 9th, and I hope people will read it, because it's my reflections not only on the election, but hopefully a roadmap to how we win this election and we keep winning so we can get our country on the right track.
Absolutely. She's the founder of the Voting's Right group, Fair Fight. It's the one, the only, Miss Stacey Abrams. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, guys.
You too, bye.
Bye, boo.